If you could bring one person you lost back to life, who would you choose? Lila was only 10 years old when she discovered a magical pen that could turn her drawings into reality. As a lonely orphan, Lila didn't just bring one person back. She would eventually draw an entire family for herself: a mother, a father, a brother, and the sister she had lost. But before any of that happened, Lila was just a little girl with nowhere to go. She had been walking through the forest for hours. Her tiny feet were covered in mud, her old dress was torn, and her stomach hurt from hunger. She had no food, no money, and no home to return to. Eventually, she could no longer walk. Lila collapsed beneath a large tree and began to cry. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and looked around the silent forest. "I don't want to die here," she whispered. Then she heard footsteps. Lila quickly raised her head. An elderly woman was slowly approaching through the trees. She looked almost 100 years old, with silver hair, a wrinkled face, and a long, simple dress. She carried an old woven bag in one hand. The woman stopped in front of Lila and looked at her carefully. "Child, why are you crying?" Lila hesitated before answering. "I have nowhere to go." The old woman sat beside her. "Have you eaten?" Lila shook her head. Without asking another question, the woman opened her bag and brought out some bread and fruit. Lila grabbed the food and began eating immediately. The old woman watched her quietly until she had finished. Then she reached into her bag again. This time, she brought out a strange black drawing pen. She placed it in Lila's hand. Lila stared at it. "What is this?" "A pen. What can I do with it?" The old woman smiled mysteriously. "Don't wish for what you want." She leaned closer to Lila. "Draw it." Lila frowned because she didn't understand. Before she could ask another question, the woman stood up and began walking away. "Wait!" Lila called. But she didn't turn around. Lila watched as she disappeared between the trees. She looked down at the strange black drawing pen in her hand. At first, she thought the old woman had simply given her a useless thing, but she decided to test it. She found a small piece of paper and drew a simple circle. Nothing happened. Lila sighed. Then, before her eyes, the drawing began to change. A real biscuit appeared on the paper. Lila froze. She slowly picked it up. She smelled it. Then she took a bite. Her eyes widened. It was real. Lila immediately drew an apple. A fresh apple appeared. She laughed. For the first time in days, she wasn't thinking about hunger. She drew a beautiful dress. The dress appeared beside her. She put it on and looked at herself in amazement. But there was still one problem. She had nowhere to sleep. So, Lila drew a small house. The moment she finished the drawing, the ground trembled. The little house appeared before her. Lila stood there with her mouth open. She slowly walked inside. There was a bed, a table, chairs, food, and everything a little girl could need. For the first time since she became an orphan, Lila had a place she could call home. That night, she lay on the bed beneath a warm blanket. She smiled. But the smile didn't last. As she stared at the empty space beside her, she remembered the person who had always made her feel safe, her older sister. Before their parents died, Lila was too young to understand what losing them meant. But her sister had been only 5 years old, and somehow that little girl had become Lila's protector. She fed her, she carried her, she comforted her whenever she cried. And whenever Lila was afraid, her sister would hold her close and whisper, "Don't be afraid, I will always protect you." Lila closed her eyes. She could still remember her sister's face. She could still remember her voice. And now, lying alone in the little house she had created, Lila finally understood what the old woman had given her. The pen could create anything. Maybe, just maybe, it could bring back the one person she had lost. Lila sat up slowly. She reached for the magical pen. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "I want my sister back." And for the first time, Lila began to draw a face she had never forgotten. Lila's hand trembled as she continued drawing. She remembered every detail of her sister's face, the shape of her eyes, her nose, her lips, and the little mark above her eyebrow. She kept drawing until the picture looked exactly like the sister she remembered. Then, Lila placed the pen down. For a few seconds, nothing happened. She stared at the drawing. Suddenly, the paper began to blow. Lila stepped backwards. A strange wind swept through the room. The drawing began to disappear from the paper, as though the person inside it was slowly being pulled into the real world. Lila covered her mouth. And then, someone appeared on the floor in front of her. It was her sister. The same face, the same hair, the same person Lila had cried herself to sleep thinking about. Lila froze. Her sister slowly opened her eyes. She looked around the strange little room. Then she saw Lila. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Sister!" The young woman looked at her with confusion. "Lila?" Lila ran toward her. They hugged tightly. Lila cried uncontrollably against her sister's chest, holding her as though she was afraid she would disappear again. Her sister held her tightly too. "Why are you crying?" she asked softly. Lila couldn't answer. She was simply too happy. She had gotten her sister back. But there was something Lila didn't know. Her sister had no memory of dying. She didn't remember the villagers. She didn't remember being attacked. She didn't remember sacrificing herself. To her, the last thing she remembered was being with Lila. And Lila decided never to tell her what had really happened. She wanted her sister to live without that pain. The next morning, Lila woke up beside the person she had missed more than anyone. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. But Lila wanted more. She wanted the kind of family she had always dreamed about. So, while her sister was sleeping, Lila took the magical pen again. She carefully drew a woman, a mother. Then she drew a man, a father. Then she drew a young man who would be her older brother. Finally, she drew another woman, the grandmother she had always wished she could have known. One by one, they became real. When Lila's sister woke up, she found strangers standing inside the house. She looked at Lila in confusion. "Who are they?" Lila smiled. "Our family." Her sister stared at the people around them. Something about it felt strange. But when the woman she now believed was her mother hugged her, she felt an unexpected warmth. For the first time, the little house was filled with laughter. Lila had finally created the family she had always dreamed about. But there was one person in that family who was different: the grandmother. The moment the older woman looked at Lila, her expression changed. She stared at the child for several seconds. Then she looked at the black pen in her hand. Her eyes widened. She knew. She knew exactly what that pen was. But she said nothing. Instead, she walked toward Lila and gently touched her face. Lila smiled. She didn't understand why the grandmother looked at her as though she had known her for years. The truth was something Lila would only discover much later. The mysterious old woman who had given her the pen was the same woman standing in front of her grandmother. But for now, the family lived happily together. Lila began using the pen carefully. She didn't create money immediately. She first created small things they needed: food, clothes, furniture. Then one evening, Lila looked at the family sitting around the dinner table. Everyone was laughing. Her sister was smiling. Her mother was serving food. Her father was telling stories. Her brother was teasing her. And Lila smiled quietly. This was everything she had ever wanted. A family, a home, people who loved her. But Lila soon realized something else. If the pen could create food and houses, it could also create wealth. So she drew a small amount of gold. The next morning, the family took it to the city and sold it. With the money, they bought a small apartment. Then Lila created more gold. They bought land, they opened their first business. Her older sister turned out to be incredibly intelligent and creative. She knew how to turn every opportunity into something bigger. Within months, the family's small business became successful. Lila kept quietly using the pen to give them what they needed. One business became two. Two became five. Their little apartment became a beautiful mansion. Their simple lives changed completely. Within less than a year, the family had become one of the richest families in the entire city. Everyone admired them. People wondered where their sudden fortune had come from, but nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew that a 10-year-old girl was sitting in her room every night, drawing the future of the entire family. And nobody knew that the grandmother already knew the secret. She watched Lila carefully. One evening, she found Lila alone with the magical pen. The old woman quietly closed the door behind her. "Lila." Lila turned around. "Yes, Grandma." The old woman looked at the pen. Then she looked directly into Lila's eyes. "Where did you get that?" Lila froze. She hadn't told anyone, not even her sister. Lila slowly tightened her grip around the pen. "The old woman in the forest gave it to me." The grandmother's face became pale. "What did she look like?" Lila described her. Silver hair, wrinkled face, old traditional dress, woven bag. The grandmother listened without saying a word. Then she whispered something that made Lila's heart stop. "That woman," she looked at the pen again, "that woman has been dead for many years." Lila stared at her. "What?" The grandmother looked at her with tears beginning to form in her eyes. And then she said, "Because that woman was me." Lila stood completely still. The room fell silent. Lila's mouth fell open. She looked at the woman standing before her. The face was different. The woman who had appeared in the forest had looked almost 100 years old. Her hair had been completely white, and her face had been covered with deep wrinkles. But this woman looked much younger. Lila slowly stepped closer. "How?" The grandmother smiled sadly. "The pen does not only create things, Lila. It can also restore what has been lost." She explained that the woman Lila had met in the forest was her true grandmother. She had used the pen many years ago to create a new life for herself, but the magic had a strange rule. Whenever someone was recreated through the pen, the person would return at the age they were meant to be in the present. That was why her grandmother had returned as a woman in her 70s. Lila couldn't believe it. "You knew I would find the pen?" The grandmother shook her head. "No, but I knew one day it would find you." She took Lila's hands. "Listen to me carefully. That pen can give you anything you want. But never forget this. When you create people, they may love you, but they may not always understand where they came from." Lila looked toward her family. Her mother was laughing with her father. Her brother was playing with her sister. Everyone looked happy. "I don't care," Lila said softly. "They are my family." The grandmother smiled. "For now." Lila didn't understand what she meant. For the next year, the family lived happily. Lila's older sister became her closest friend. She was intelligent, creative, and incredibly ambitious. She helped the family turn their small businesses into successful companies. She taught Lila how to read business documents. She taught her how to speak confidently. Most importantly, she never stopped protecting her.
Whenever Lila wanted something, her sister found a way to give it to her. If Lila wanted a new dress, she bought it. If Lila wanted to learn something, she found a teacher. If Lila was afraid, she was there. The grandmother also watched over Lila carefully. She knew the truth. She knew that every house, every business, every piece of gold, and every beautiful thing the family possessed had come from Lila. But the rest of the family had no idea. They believed their success was simply good fortune. And then one afternoon, everything changed. A priest arrived at the mansion. He was a respected man in the city. He wore expensive white robes and carried a large Bible. Lila's father welcomed him warmly. The priest looked around the mansion before quietly saying, "Your family has been blessed with extraordinary wealth." Everyone smiled. But then his expression changed. "There is something I must tell you." The family became silent. The priest said he had seen something troubling in a vision. He claimed that the family was destined for even greater wealth. They were supposed to become one of the richest families in the entire world. But something was holding them back. Something was bringing misfortune onto the family. Lila's father immediately asked, "What is it?" The priest looked around the room. Then his eyes landed on Lila. Lila's heart dropped. He pointed toward her. "That child." Everyone turned to look at Lila. Her mother frowned. Her father looked confused. The priest continued, "She carries a strange aura. Her presence is interfering with the family's destiny." Lila stared at him in disbelief. The grandmother immediately stood up. "That is a lie." The room became silent. The priest looked at her. "You should be careful, madam." The grandmother stepped closer. "I know exactly what is happening here." But before she could say anything else, her father interrupted. "Mother, please." The priest lowered his head as though he was disappointed. "I only came here to warn you." He then told them that if they wanted their fortune to grow, they needed someone with a more powerful and fortunate destiny to bring balance into the family. A few days later, the family met a little girl named Vivian. Vivian was sweet, beautiful, polite, and very good at making adults like her. She cried when she told them about her difficult childhood. She said she had never experienced the love of a real family. Lila watched quietly. Something about Vivian made her uncomfortable, but she couldn't explain why. Her father immediately felt sorry for the girl. He said, "We should give her a home." Lila's mother agreed, and soon Vivian became the newest member of the family. At first, Lila tried to welcome her. She shared her toys, she gave Vivian some of her clothes, she even showed her the garden. But Vivian wasn't interested in being Lila's friend. She wanted something much bigger. She wanted Lila's place. Slowly, Vivian began changing. When the family was around, she acted sweet. When they were alone, she became cruel. She would deliberately break things and then blame Lila. She would secretly take Lila's belongings and then pretend she knew nothing about them. And whenever Lila tried to defend herself, Vivian would cry. The family always believed Vivian. One evening, Vivian deliberately knocked over an expensive vase in the living room. The vase shattered across the floor. Lila came running. "What happened?" Vivian immediately started crying. "Lila pushed me." Lila stared at her. "I didn't." Her father walked into the room. He saw the broken vase. Then he looked at Lila. His face hardened. "Why would you do this?" "I didn't do it, Daddy," Vivian cried, even louder. The grandmother watched from the doorway. She knew exactly what had happened, and so did Lila's older sister. Her sister stepped forward. "She is lying." Everyone turned toward her. Vivian lowered her head and began crying again. The priest's words suddenly echoed in her father's mind. Perhaps the priest was right. Perhaps Lila really was the source of their problems. From that day forward, things began changing. The family that Lila had created with love slowly began treating her like a burden. And Vivian was only getting started, because she had not come into that family by accident. She had come with a plan. And somewhere in the city, the priest who introduced her was waiting for that plan to succeed.
For the first few days after Vivian joined the family, Lila tried her best to accept her. She shared her clothes with her. She showed her the garden. She even allowed Vivian to sleep in the bedroom beside hers. But Lila's older sister noticed something that everyone else ignored. Vivian was always watching Lila. Whenever Lila opened a drawer, Vivian watched. Whenever Lila went into her room, Vivian followed her with her eyes. And whenever Lila used the magical pen, Vivian tried to find out what she was doing. One afternoon, Lila was in her room looking through the drawings she had created over the years. Some of them were simple drawings of food and clothes. Others were much more important. There were drawings connected to the family's businesses, their properties, and the things that had made them wealthy. Lila kept them carefully because she knew that destroying some of those drawings could make the things they represented disappear. She placed the most important paintings inside a wooden box and locked it. Unfortunately, Vivian had been watching from the doorway. That night, while everyone was asleep, Vivian quietly entered Lila's room. She opened the wooden box. Inside were several beautiful paintings. Vivian picked one up. She didn't understand why Lila was so protective of them. Then she noticed something strange. The painting looked almost alive. She slowly began tearing it. Suddenly, Lila woke up. "What are you doing?" Vivian froze. Lila jumped out of bed and rushed toward her. "Don't touch that!" Vivian tried to pull the painting away. Lila grabbed it from her hands. "Give it to me!" Vivian suddenly fell backward. Then she began screaming. "Lila, stop!" Lila froze. "What?" Vivian covered her face and began crying. "You hurt me!" Lila stared at her in disbelief. "I didn't hurt you. You were destroying my painting." The noise woke the family. Lila's father rushed into the room. "What happened?" Vivian immediately ran toward him, crying. "Lila attacked me because I touched her painting." Lila's eyes widened. "That's not true." Her father looked at the painting in Lila's hands. "Why were you fighting over a painting?" "She was trying to destroy it." Vivian shook her head. "I only wanted to see it." Lila desperately tried to explain. "If she tears it, something terrible will happen." Her father became angry. "Enough!" Lila fell silent. "You are becoming jealous of Vivian," he said. "I'm not." "Then stop treating her badly." Lila looked around the room. Nobody believed her, except her older sister. She stepped forward. "I believe Lila." Her father turned toward her. "You weren't here. You didn't see what happened." The older sister looked at Vivian. "I know exactly what I saw." Vivian lowered her head and began crying again. Her mother immediately went to comfort her. And once again, Lila was the one left standing alone. The grandmother had watched everything from the hallway. She knew Vivian was lying, but she also knew that revealing the truth too soon could expose Lila's secret. So she quietly walked toward Lila and held her hand. "Don't give up," she whispered. Lila looked at her grandmother with tears in her eyes. "I don't understand why nobody believes me." The grandmother squeezed her hand. "One day, they will." But Vivian wasn't finished. After that night, she became even more careful. She began secretly damaging things connected to Lila's magic. Sometimes she moved important documents. Sometimes she scratched paintings. Sometimes she broke things and left them where Lila would be blamed. And every time something went wrong, the family blamed Lila. Then Vivian discovered something even more valuable. One of Lila's paintings represented a massive business agreement. The family was supposed to sign the contract the following morning. If the deal succeeded, their company would become one of the most powerful businesses in the city. Vivian knew how important it was. That night, she waited until everyone had gone to sleep. She entered the room where the painting was kept. She looked around. Then she picked the painting, and with a smile on her face, she tore it straight down the middle. The next morning,
Lila's father arrived home looking furious. The business partners had cancelled their agreement. They had suddenly changed their minds. The deal was gone. The family stood in shock. Then the father looked toward Lila. Lila immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? Her father shouted, "The business deal is finished." Lila's heart sank. She looked at the painting. It was torn. She immediately understood. Vivian did it. Everyone turned toward her. Vivian's face changed. "I didn't!" Lila pointed at the damaged painting. "You destroyed it!" Her father slammed his hand against the table. "Enough, Lila!" "But it's true! You are always blaming Vivian." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "I am telling the truth." Her father looked at her coldly. "Ever since you came into this family, something always goes wrong." The words broke something inside Lila. She stood completely still. Her mother didn't defend her. Her brother remained silent. Vivian quietly stood behind them, pretending to cry. Only the grandmother and Lila's older sister looked at her with pain in their eyes. Later that night, Lila sat alone in her room. She looked at the magical pen lying on her table. Then she looked at the paintings. She had created everything they had. She had given them a home. She had given them wealth. She had brought them into existence. Yet, somehow, she was the one they treated like a curse. Her older sister entered the room. She sat beside Lila. "You don't deserve this." Lila wiped her tears. "Why does everyone love Vivian more than me?" Her sister didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled Lila into her arms. "Because they don't know the truth." Lila looked up. "What truth?" Her sister stared into her eyes. "The truth about who you really are to this family." Before Lila could respond, the door slowly opened. The grandmother stood there. She had heard everything. She walked inside and closed the door. Then she looked at Lila. "It's time." Lila frowned. "For what?" The grandmother looked at the magical pen. "It's time for you to stop hiding what you created." Lila's heart began beating faster. Outside the room, Vivian was standing silently in the hallway. And she had heard everything. She slowly smiled, because now she knew that Lila was hiding something, and she was determined to find out what it was. The next morning, Lila woke up with a heavy feeling in her heart. She had barely slept. The words her father had spoken kept repeating in her mind. "Ever since you came into this family, something always goes wrong." She looked at the magical pen lying on the table. For the first time, she didn't feel proud of it. She felt tired. Tired of creating, tired of protecting, tired of being blamed for things she hadn't done. Her older sister walked into the room and sat beside her. "You don't have to stay here anymore." Lila looked at her. "Where would I go?" "Anywhere, as long as you are with me." Lila's eyes filled with tears. But before she could answer, the grandmother entered the room. She closed the door behind her. "It's time." Lila looked up. "Time for what?" The grandmother walked toward the table and picked up the magical pen. "Time for your family to know the truth." Lila became frightened. "What if they don't believe us?" The grandmother looked at her. "Then we will show them." That afternoon, the entire family gathered in the living room. Lila's father sat proudly in his chair. Her mother sat beside him. Her brother stood nearby. Vivian sat comfortably between them, pretending to be innocent. The priest was there too. Lila immediately became suspicious. Why was he there? Her grandmother stepped forward. "I have something to tell this family." The priest frowned. "What is this about?" The grandmother ignored him. She looked at Lila. "Tell them." Lila's hands trembled. Her father sighed. "Lila, whatever this is, please don't start another argument." Lila looked at him. "I'm not here to argue." She reached into her pocket. Then she pulled out the magical pen. Everyone stared at it. Vivian's expression immediately changed. She recognized it. The grandmother pointed toward the pen. Do you remember when this family had nothing? Nobody answered. Do you remember how you lived in a small house? Her father looked confused. Mother, what are you talking about? The grandmother continued. Do you remember how your fortune suddenly changed? The father slowly stood up. Yes. Do you remember how you became wealthy almost overnight? Nobody spoke. Then the grandmother said the words that changed everything. Lila created it. The room became completely silent. Vivian laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. But the grandmother turned toward her. Is it? Vivian stopped smiling. Lila's father shook his head. Mother, what are you saying? I'm saying that your daughter is the reason you have everything. The father stared at Lila. How? Lila looked down at the pen. Then she slowly walked toward the large painting hanging on the wall. It was one of the paintings she had created years ago. She touched it. This is where your house came from. Everyone stared at her. And that, she pointed toward another painting, is where your first business came from. Her father shook his head. No. Lila's voice trembled. I drew them. Her mother covered her mouth. Lila continued. I drew the food we ate. She pointed toward another painting. I drew the gold. She pointed toward another. I drew the businesses. Her brother stared at her in disbelief. Then Lila looked at her older sister, and I drew her. The older sister's eyes filled with tears. Lila turned toward her. I brought her back because she was the only person who ever protected me. The room went silent. Her sister walked toward Lila and held her hand. I don't remember dying, she whispered. I know. Lila smiled sadly. But I remember everything. The father still refused to accept it. You are telling me that a 10-year-old child created this entire family? Lila looked at him. Yes. Then she held up the pen. I can prove it. She took one of her drawings from the table. It was a drawing of a beautiful vase. Lila slowly tore the drawing in half. Everyone watched. Nothing happened for a moment. Then the expensive vase sitting on a nearby table suddenly disappeared. The family gasped. The father stumbled backward. No! Lila looked at him. Now you know. The grandmother turned toward Vivian, and you knew something was different about her. Vivian's face became pale. The priest immediately stood up. This is nonsense. The older sister looked at him. Then why were you always telling my parents that Lila was cursed? The priest became silent. The grandmother stepped forward. Because he was working with Vivian. Everyone turned toward Vivian. Vivian shook her head. No! But the grandmother continued. They wanted this family to believe Lila was the problem. The father looked at Vivian. Is that true? Vivian began crying. At first, it looked like the same tears she had used so many times before. But this time, nobody rushed to comfort her. Her father stared at her. Answer me. Vivian remained silent. The priest tried to leave, but Lila's brother blocked the door. You are not going anywhere. The truth finally came out. Vivian had been working with the priest. She had entered the family because she wanted Lila's position. She had deliberately destroyed the paintings and blamed Lila. She had manipulated the family into believing that Lila was bringing them bad luck, and the priest had helped her because he wanted access to the family's wealth. Lila's father slowly sat down. His face was filled with regret. He looked at Lila. I'm sorry. Her mother began crying. We didn't know. Lila looked at them quietly. You didn't know because you never asked. Her father stood up. Please forgive us. Lila's eyes filled with tears. You were my family. She looked around the room. I created you because I was lonely. She took a deep breath. I gave you everything
because I wanted to be loved." Her father began crying. "And we failed you." Lila nodded, "Yes." He stepped toward her. "Please, don't take everything away." Lila looked at the magical pen. Then she looked at the people she had once called family. For a moment, she could have erased everything: the mansion, the businesses, the wealth, the life she had created for them. But she didn't. She simply placed the pen in her pocket. "I'm not going to destroy you." Everyone looked at her. "But I'm not staying with you either." Her older sister immediately took her hand. "I'm going with you." The grandmother smiled. "So am I." The three of them walked toward the door. Lila stopped for a final moment. She looked back at her parents. "You wanted Vivian because you thought she would bring you happiness." She looked at Vivian. "Maybe she will." Then she looked at her father. "But you should remember something." Her voice became calm. "The person you called a curse was the person who gave you everything." Lila walked out. Her older sister followed. Her grandmother followed them. They left the mansion behind. Months later, Lila's older sister built a successful business of her own. She became one of the youngest and most respected businesswomen in the city. Lila grew up surrounded by people who genuinely loved her, and the grandmother remained by their side. As for the family Lila had created, they eventually lost much of the fortune they had taken for granted, but Lila never returned to punish them. She had learned something more important. She didn't need magic to create a family anymore. She already had one. One evening, Lila sat beside her older sister and grandmother watching the sunset. The magical pen rested inside a small wooden box. Her sister looked at her. "Do you still use it?" Lila smiled. "Sometimes." "For what?" Lila looked at the people beside her. "Not for family." She closed the box. "I already have the family I need." And for the first time in her life, Lila didn't feel like an orphan. She felt loved. She felt safe. She felt home. The end.